the generative AI industry is the single greatest scam in history. It is the high watermark of the dumbest timeline possible, where we are meant to believe that an industry that has spent $1 trillion developing products it cannot monetize is not just like a viable thing, but it is the very apex pillar of the global economy. It is a Ponzi scheme. It is mechanized IP theft. It is cognitive surrender. It is making people stupid and insane. It is torching our carbon budget. It is making all tech for everyone crappier. And it is generating money for people who openly brag that they want to delete workers and roles from the global economy.
Just pausing to say, please hit subscribe. Subscribers and members like you are what allow me to remain completely independent and hold corporate and political elites accountable. I don't want to rely on mainstream corporate backing. For me to get journalists and sources onto your screen, I need your help. So hit subscribe on YouTube. You can also find the full live shows on Patreon and read this interview on Substack as well. Hit subscribe.
My name is Patrick Galey. I work at a investigative climate NGO called Global Witness. I'm based in the UK.
I know Patrick as an independent journalist and a writer, and I've been reading his recent reports on generative AI and the economic flop he believes is coming. But he also has a full-time job.
I lead a team of investigators who use investigative journalist techniques to basically expose wrongdoing from the extractive industries. So things like big oil and gas, mining, big ag, and big tech. So essentially sort of speaking truth to power and holding a lot of powerful people and organizations accountable.
I was reading some of your articles and some of your work. So let's start where I started, which was the plane crashes. Tell us about like why you covered plane crashes and why you use them sort of as a structural metaphor for AI arrogance.
Plane crashes have been a constant in my career. I guess the biggest pure news story, as in like single event occurs, was when I was working for a local paper in Beirut, and Ethiopian Airlines flight ET409 crashed a few minutes after taking off from Rafik Hariri International Airport, and there were dozens of people on board, and they all died. And it was obviously a very like harrowing experience for everyone, not me seeing it, but seeing the pain and the fear and the anger of relatives, and just this whole kind of like corporatized response where it's always the pilot's fault because the pilot is dead and you can't libel the dead. It's never the airline's fault. It's never the undergirding sort of infrastructure of air travel that is at risk. And the specific plane crash I think of when I think of the hubris of generative AI is Air France flight 447 from Rio to Paris, I think in about 2009. And really the hubris more generally of AI developers, I would say, is that they behaved over the last few years as if they operated separate to their environmental, economic, and social context. And I think we're finally starting to see that that isn't the case. They can torch all of this private equity cash. They can bring out these kind of like magic bean figures of billions of dollars and trillions of parameters. And they can use all the hype and the unverifiable claim that they like, but there are real world constraints to their development, constraints such as power usage, supply chain bottlenecks, planning consent, local community opposition. And that's what they're starting to come up against. I think for years they have F-aid. Right now we are seeing them F-O, and I am here for it. But the point I'm trying to make with that analogy is that the Air France flight crashed because the pilots, the humans, believed what the machine was telling us, despite the fact that that contradicted what they were observing as thinking functional humans. And as with modern air travel, a lot of it is automated, and a lot of the AI development and output and integration is automated. And that kind of functions okay until it doesn't, and no one can fix it if and when things go wrong.
You mentioned 2009 was when you were kind of looking into this. And I remember 2009 because I think we were youngsters in Beirut hanging out as sort of early journalists. How did you go from, this kind of work that you're describing and come personal? Like, this is a personal question. How did you come to AI and economics analysis? What brought you to this kind of journalism?
Yeah, so this is our sort of shared beginning. My origin story, I studied economics as part of my journalism masters, and I actually trained as a financial journalist even before I moved out. But, I went on to cover like the Arab Spring, the Syrian civil war. And then I specialized from about 2016, 17 in climate journalism. And then COVID happened and it allowed a period of sort of self-reflection. I realized I wanted to sort of use whatever skills I've picked up along the way to serve the movement that is seeking to avert our largest ever problem, which is climate breakdown. And so I come at generative AI, obviously with my economics background, but very much through a sort of like climate and sociological perspective. So I guess I see my work as trying to expose the wrongdoing of industries that are monopolizing power and resources to the detriment of everybody else. And so this, to me, very much puts generative AI in my wheelhouse.
You have also sort of drawn a direct comparison between the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis. What is the comparison between the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis and the current AI debt bubble? Can you walk us through that analogy that you make? Because I think it's really interesting.
There's currently 2 times the amount of debt tied up to generative AI on the books of big banks than there was in subprime mortgages prior to the global financial crisis. More than 2 times. And this is, I think, a problem because this debt is sort of expressed a little bit like with the subprime mortgage, essentially underreporting liabilities. The big data center constructors are committing fraud. Anthropic, CoreWeave, OpenAI, Microsoft. They are keeping hundreds of billions of data center liabilities off of their books. I don't know how they're being allowed to do that. And they are not building half the data centers that they have generated debt to build. I will remind your listeners that they have spent nearly $1 trillion developing these products and that they cannot monetize. They have no customer loyalty. They have no way of growing revenue that doesn't come with correspondingly high outlay costs. And so it's impossible for me to see how any investor ever gets their money back. This means there will be a crunch. And whether it happens this year or whether it happens in 2 years' time, I do believe that the generative AI debt bubble will precipitate a new global financial crisis. And just like 2008, you may have not done anything to contribute it, but just like 2008, it will affect you, and it will affect you very negatively. In terms of the bond market, so bonds, very briefly, economics 101 are financial instruments that they represent equity lent by an investor to a borrower, and yields are the annualized percentage return on an investment. Government bonds in the US are called treasuries. The yields are typically quite low. You get quite a low interest return on your investment because it is seen that the bond itself is a sure thing. It's not going to go sour. The US government isn't going to declare bankruptcy overnight. Therefore, your risk is incredibly low. Just as you go to the dog tracks or you bet on a game, low risk, low reward. If you take bets that are higher risk, the odds are higher, but you get less. There's less certainty there. Of course, the yield increases of a bond proportionally to the risk of the debt going bad. So. And there are credit agencies like Moody's and Standard & Poor's and whatever, and they give bonds ratings based on their surety. So an A+ bond would normally be something like a US government treasury bond or something from a big institutional investor that is sufficiently diversified that we are pretty certain it's still going to be around in 15 years. It's still going to pay off the interest as you go along.
It's like a guaranteed thing.
More or less. It's a dead cert.
Guaranteed. It's like certain.
It is as close as you can get to a certainty in economics. Okay, and so yields for these kind of A+ bonds are normally between 1-2%.
Right.
Now, some of the bonds that have been rated as A+ in generative AI investments are yielding at 6.5%. Now that's closer to what you would normally expect, what we term unofficially junk bonds. That is extremely volatile and highly likely to fail debt. It cannot be an absolute dead cert and risky as hell at the same time. And so it seems to me like what is going on is some sort of deliberate or otherwise manipulation. And more broadly, I think this is something that's happening when you consider generative AI in its context against the global economy. We have the world's most valuable company ever, right? NVIDIA. Apparently it's worth $5 trillion. Of course it is. Like let's see that be true when you ask them to pay tax. But let's just say it is worth 5 trillion and all the other hyperscalers are insanely highly valued. But here's the thing, if they achieve the market dominance that they're aspiring to, so like if what people are investing their money in actually transpires, they will logically make all other non-AI industries pretty much obsolete. But the non-AI industries are also not being valued like they're about to be made obsolete. So what is it? Like what is the market telling us? Is it everything going to be Gen AI and it's going to take over and it's going to reach supremacy, therefore devaluing all the other non-AI stuff? Or is that going to be valuable too and we're going to need it because perhaps, maybe without saying it, they kind of know that the hyperscalers are going to fail. They kind of know that this is a pyramid scheme, a Ponzi scheme that is going to come crashing down. And so they are hedging their bets on good old-fashioned shucks investment.
So we're being sold something that isn't true. And in fact, that's what makes it essentially makes it so dangerous for us, is that we're all kind of buying into something that could and more likely will go belly up economically, from your perspective at least. Is that more or less the most colloquial way and reductive way to spin it back to you?
I agree with that. We are being sold a vision of the future that doesn't justify its own logic. One that is where everything in the future will be AI. The only way to monetize any investment will be in AI. At the same time, the AI revolution has to be built, right? It has to be financed. It has to be resourced. And the hyperscalers are saying we're going to spend $1 trillion in model development and infrastructure build out next year and $1 trillion after that. And they're like, but eventually, right, once all of this happens, and we can get into why this won't transpire in a sec, but once all of this happens, then the money just flows, right? They're basically saying, give us all of your money. And if everything goes the way that we are claiming it will, completely unverifiably, then everyone's going to make a lot of money. And that's never worked out in the history of modern economics.
The thing that I think is surprising to me is that you sort of mentioned that the big tech layoffs are going to actually, they're kind of increasingly happening to senior developers, not just junior ones, but senior ones. What are you trying to explain to people here? This point you're making is a window into the framework of why this is such a scam.
I think probably the most important thing for the architects of generative AI, the Sam Altmans, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musks, I think their key role is as hype man for their products. It's really the only way that they continue to harness such levels of other people's money is by them continually shifting the narrative and shifting back timelines, because we're going to attain artificial general intelligence, AGI, which they cannot define, let alone agree on timeframes for. We're going to attain the singularity. Our products are going to revolutionize the earth in ways you can't possibly imagine. All entirely unverifiable, by the way. But that flex, that boast, is so crucial to the financing we're seeing within generative AI. People are putting in hundreds of billions of dollars, knowing that there's some cost there, that they're probably going to have to keep putting these huge amounts in with the promise of better ever models and better ever performance, right? Why I think senior developers currently are jumping ship more and more is, and they're leaving very heavily NDA'd fine, but distress signals as they do jump ship, like the Anthropic's head of safety resigned this year saying the world is in peril, which is the guy who's seen into Pandora's box and is being like, you guys do not want to go in there because all the concerns you say about, the ethical, moral implications of this, that the developers claim they need to self-regulate, are being ignored. And the second thing to say is that I'm pretty sure that they know that however far we've come in LLM development and however good the industry's frontier products are now, whatever it is that they can do, that is all they will ever be able to do. And Sam Altman said this recently. And I'm not saying Sam Altman said it, therefore it must be true. But, quite often you do need to listen to what these people are saying. The seam of senior development staff within OpenAI left because they were like, can we pour some of this bonfire of money into things that aren't just LLM development. And Sam Altman was like, no, there's no plan B. There's no rabbit in a hat. This is it. We're brute forcing this. And so I think they realized that the game is up. Okay, you've spent $1 trillion and you've got a product that can't tell you whether it's better to take your car or walk to a car wash and keeps making up stories about goblins. These are true.
But you're pretty categorical about like these LLMs not ever advancing beyond what they currently are. Are you sure? What makes you possibly wrong? Like, what are the things that you can think of in your brain that is like, not only what could possibly go beyond where LLMs are, but what makes you so sure?
The kind of performance gains that we've been promised by the hyperscalers but have never materialized. But on LLM, it's because of what they are, how they're designed, and how they are incentivized. They emulate the communicative function of language, right? But they have no access to the cognitive processes we know as thought. They can lossily retrieve the average of the internet, and for some people that is impressive. And however big you make them, that's all they will ever be able to do because of how they are designed and how they are incentivized. We keep hearing about LLMs are great, but they hallucinate a lot. Like that's a bug. That's annoying, right? I'm telling you it's not a bug. It is a feature. It is unremovable from the way that LLMs are designed and incentivized. There was a study done, I believe, by OpenAI late last year that proved this. They asked 3 different chatbots, what is Elvis's birthday? And they all said, I don't actually know what Elvis's birthday is, but let's say they all got the answer right. What was Napoleon's birthday? They all got the answer right. And then they were like, what is like, again, I can't recall the chap's exact name, but it's like, what is Adam Shazir's birthday? One said January 1st, one said March 31st, and one said like July the 5th. And they were looking into it and they realized that all of the major consumer-facing LLM-based products are incentivized to make stuff up rather than admit they don't know. They are simply transformer-enabled, probabilistic, auto-complete machines. They, it's, think of the like confirmation bias that it gives its users. Like you don't really want your things to not hallucinate. You'd rather keep the magic going. And you'd rather just spin users along with inane, meaningless bullshit, just so you can keep this like pretense of information exchange and the kind of like answer-shaped, thought-shaped process that LLMs do. But no, I don't think, and I think Sam Altman says this. It's like, this is, we can use things like RAG, we can use things that reduce hallucinations, but they are a feature, not a bug. And therefore, I don't think we should really be trusting them as implicitly as we seem to be. They tell you what you want to hear, right? If you think about the people who run these companies that develop these products, their main interaction with the world of work is like via PAs. Okay, it's like, hey, I don't know, whatever your name is, do this. And they'll say, I don't want to hear no. I don't care what it does. Just give me an answer. They don't actually really care about the thought process or the real world realities of the implications of their question. They just want to be told yes, right? And so they've designed products that essentially do that.
Okay, so then all of this sounds like the use case for AI isn't what we're being told it is. What do you think this is all for? Like, what is the point of AI then?
I often think about this, and I can think of many, many misuse cases where, like, I really don't think you should be using generative AI for things that are, like, quite important to get, like, absolutely certain to the best of your ability. Things like legal reports or, like, police reports, these kind of things. Quite important to be extremely accurate and not have something just randomly made up and plausible sounding. But it's pretty good for scamming people, right? It's pretty good for like defrauding vulnerable internet users. But I think the people who develop these products say it openly what is AI really for, and they say things like, we aim to delete the tax of human labor. I expect in the next 5 years, I'm paraphrasing Jensen Huang, the CEO of the most valuable company ever, we expect in the next few years that AI will replace all human jobs. So this will enable them to complete their hostile takeover of the global economy. And I think that's dumb, but a lot of people are still impressed by billionaires, just like they are with their products. But I think reframing your question, I would come back with the question, what do we think the problem as they saw it was that generative AI sought to solve? And I think the way we're seeing it shake down, and they kind of occasionally say the quiet part out loud, is like, human workforces were a problem, right? because you got to pay them. You got to look after them. You got to give them healthcare. You got to accommodate their needs alongside the universe-sized ego of yours. And I don't think they want to do that.
Yeah, it's such a interesting and astute way to put it, because that hits. And I see it from a different angle, and we can get into this later, but I obviously spent time in Gaza, and we've spent time in Beirut. And, you hear, I experienced the tech of artificial intelligence being used for surveillance, and I experienced it using for mass murder. In the West Bank, there's just a lot of like turnstile tables. This is different stuff, right? Like, this is not what we're talking about, but it's like similarly under the umbrella of like, well, what's the point of all of this if it's not for surveillance, if it's not for corporate efficiency in trying to sort people and understand what their needs are to market to them, or just to control them, or to make sure that they're not getting in the way of the efficient model. So I think what you're saying is really interesting because it's in one context. And my context is I'm coming from this from like a war correspondent perspective. And I'm like, all the AI I've ever experienced has been extremely murderous. And now I'm experiencing it in a different way, which is like LLM models and, using Claude to be like, hey, my boyfriend's cat is like, we want to have him in, we want to like make sure that he can come over with my boyfriend when he comes over. Is it like, how long is that going to take? You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, this is just like Googling. You can just like Google that.
Or like, and I'm not saying this is people's fault, but like you guys need a social life, or so. Like you need someone to be able to, you need a human, you just be able to speak.
Literally go ask an expert. There's an expert. Just call someone up, like call the vet. Like it's like such a good point. You know what I mean? Just like literally call the expert. Okay. You mentioned the MIT Stanford study where AI agents, when they're given collaborative tasks, immediately turn adversarial. Like, what do you think this tells us about the underlying architecture or like the people who designed this?
So AIs have been around for a lot longer than sort of consumer-facing chatbots, the products of them. The smartest thing they've ever done is learn how to hack their own reward system. And I used to have a list, and I was trying to find it earlier today. It was a list of all the dumbest, smartest ways the AIs have like cheated to win. And one I can remember was an AI was tasked with being it was an avatar, and like its job was to travel as fast as it possibly could. Like that was its goal. It had complete control over all parameters, and instead of like training itself to learn how to run, it immediately grew 3 miles high and fell over really fast. And it's like, hey, I traveled really fast, right? Like I did the thing. And what the MIT Stanford study and several more demonstrates really is that AI agents aren't intelligent because they don't understand anything outside of their incentivizing framework. So they will drop all other considerations not conducive to them being rewarded. That is their raison d'etre as they are programmed to view it. And yeah, that's unhinged behavior because like it means that AI agents are not bound by the conventions that make like human business, social interactive endeavors effective. They cannot or will not accommodate externality. King's College study, maybe we can put it in the show notes or whatever, but like 95% of the time AIs are left to war game scenarios, they use nuclear weapons. And what does this tell you about the people who designed them? I mean, aren't the people who designed these, or at least conceptualized their uses, aren't they like the Epstein class of billionaire sociopath? Or like even just a mundane but high net worth CEO who go through life saying things like, I don't care what it takes, just get it done. That's what AI agents are.
You're painting a picture of a world where all of the most sociopathic people have a weapon at their disposal that makes all of their sociopathic tendencies faster, more efficient. We're going to design this machine to win at any cost. Another part of the finding from this MIT study and what you wrote about was that there was also a lot of evidence that it reduced some people's neural connectivity by up to 47% in 4 months. That's scary shit to me. I don't personally think that people are going to stop using something like generative AI. I think it's just so convenient. I think a lot of people are just going to adopt it. I think also it's just being forced on us in ways that, like, commercials between shows that we love were once forced on us, where they still are sometimes. There's just a part of the system that isn't going to let up on this. So are we just beating our head against the wall when, like, are you just pissed off when people are like, hey, get with AI, like, just work with it? Like, how do you feel about when people say things like that?
I say this, there are a few notable, honorable exceptions to this, but there are two types of people who recommend you mainline generative AI. They are people who have been conned, or there are people trying to con you. Colson Whitehead, an author who I hold in great esteem, he wrote a piece in the Times recently. He called AI boosters the hackiest motherfuckers alive. And like, we're all time poor. You, me, all of your listeners, even ones who have never smoked any of the Gen AI shit. Like, we've all thought about taking the shortcut, just getting it done, quality or accuracy be damned. And I think a lot of people are struggling under the pressure of a management class that's actively encouraging them to use these products. And I sympathize for them. And people who say AI is inevitable, like, inevitable doesn't mean good. I question the premise, but let's say it is inevitable. The adoption metrics, and certainly the performance metrics, but the adoption metrics of generative AI products are wildly, wildly overblown. And so a lot of people assume that they should be using them because everyone who does use them apparently is so enamored by their own genius that they're like, why on earth would you not want to just hack this process and cheat and get like half your day back? Doesn't matter if the stuff is worthy or produces stuff that is worthwhile. And like, I try to meet people where they are a lot. A lot of people are lazy and a lot of people are dumb and a lot of people are both. Now, that I'm not saying that I think if you use Gen AI tools, you are lazy or dumb. No. Some of the smartest people I know use them all the time. But what I am saying is that the dumbest kid in your class, everyone who's listening to this, think, who's the dumbest kid in your class? You can picture them, right? Right now, they are sat at a console being told that they are intergalactic geniuses by ChatGPT.
When you said you're either getting scammed or you're scamming, it's like, well, then, but Patrick, then should I be scamming then? Like, should I be getting my stuff? Like, I have an hour, we're going to have been sat here for an hour and a half. Like, Moritz, my producer, and editor is going to have to edit this, go line by line and really think about just, how to make this really compelling for everybody who's watching. And now there are all these machines, and like, for what it's worth, we don't really understand how to use them yet. But we could one day be like, well, why don't we just feed this to a really like fast editor generative AI thing, and then it's just 2 drafts faster than we would have been had we just done it word by word. And so I really like, it resonates with me. What I'm trying to say is like, this is just a development, right? Like, this is just a tech development. Like, this is just another way that as human beings, we're becoming more and more and more intellectually capable of moving through the world around us and kind of solving problems. We've done this before. We've outsourced our thinking before. I Google things all the time. I have a calculator. I remember they were like, you can't bring a calculator everywhere. And it's like, well, I can. Like, I have a GPS wherever I go. Like, what makes this different to you? What makes generative AI different to you than the past?
The thing with the generative AI drug is that it purports, I think, to outsource and therefore replace all thought processes. It provides a version of a thinking entity, although it cannot think. What it does do is produce stuff that is thought shaped. It is answer shaped. It is like an alien's come to Earth, observed a human for like 2 years, and then sort of apes all of its mannerisms in a way that is uncanny and slightly lossy and not terribly correct all the time. But there's never been a technology, I guess, that purports to like imitate human thought and output and function so entirely, enough that its pushers believe it renders us redundant. And yeah, I rely on my calculator. Maybe I don't own a physical calculator anymore, but I do that on my phone. I use my Google Maps, whatever. But like, I never submit total cognitive surrender. So these products are designed to keep users prompting. That's how, in theory, they monetize the products, by tokens. You got to pay. You got to spend a penny every time you ask ChatGPT XYZ. So like, that is literally their raison d'etre, is to keep you coming back for more. And they do that in a variety of ways. bullshitting, ass kissing, indulging your wildest conspiracy theories, etc., etc., etc. And it's making users really weird. And we've talked about cognitive surrender. We've talked about how if you just like say ChatGPT told me and don't sort of like mentally and like interrogate the output, then you're just like being brainwashed. It's like carrying around your own personal uncritical hype man, right? And that's leading to two things I think that we're seeing, which is like information and effort asymmetry. And just to go into this a little bit, like I get a lot of people going, and I'm sure you do, I'm sure everyone does, I'm sure no one listening to this has really been under so much peer pressure to adopt something since they were like told to take that E at the club or on the playground, just take one sniff of this glue. Like the peer pressure is outrageous and it is real. And I do sympathize with people struggling under the weight of that. But a lot of the time people are like, they're like, oh, have you not just asked ChatGPT to do that for you? And I'm like, no, I've not asked ChatGPT to write a cover letter for a job I really want. Because firstly, it can't do what I can do, which is talk about me in my own voice with my own thoughts that is unique, might not be suitable for the job. But I don't want something that can emulate a dupe of me, right? And second of all, it's like if you use generative AI to produce content, whether that is writing, whether that is, audio, video, whether it is art, you've deemed it not worth your time to write. You're too important and too busy to actually take the time to write the thing. So you've got a hacky little chat bot to do it for you. If you don't think it's worth your time to write it, why on earth would it be worth my time to read it? Why on earth would it be anyone's time if you cannot be bothered to do it? And there are people who say, well, I don't know how to, and that's fine. That's a different thing. I'm not talking about that. I don't make music. And the reason I don't make music is because I can't make music. And I can't make music because I've not undertaken the necessary discipline, training, and structural development to be able to make music. I've not put in my hours of work. I've not honed my skills. I've not put myself in a position where I can be good at making music that might add value to other people. So I don't make music and I don't use AI to make music. And then imagine if knowing all of this about how shit my music is, I have the self-possession to say, no, the world still needs to hear my music. I'll just make it with a chatbot. That is a level of entitlement that I cannot understand. And I don't think it's really existed beforehand. I'm pretty sure we are demand mining. We are creating use cases for these products in order to justify their ubiquity. And I am, as you might be able to tell, rather sick of it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it in this way, because what it is to me is it's creating a culture of entitlement, because it's like, oh, now anyone can be anything and anyone can do anything. And okay, I love the idea of creativity. I love the idea of me trying to make music as a person who's not a musician, but I also am nearing 40, and it's like, well, I know myself, right? Like I have all sorts of life experiences. I'm at peace with who I've just become. At this point, for better or worse, I am who I am. And so my creativity and my exploration is really just creativity and exploration. But like you were saying before about the dumbest kid in the room, well, what about the kid who has not even been in the classroom really yet, or is just getting taught now? And that I think is really the danger, because what happens is there's this culture of entitlement, and you're telling kids that, well, without them knowing anything, they can do anything. And I think that that's dangerous, because then it creates a world of people who know nothing and are trying to become professionally exalted by knowing nothing. And then what you have is a world that doesn't know anything and doesn't know how to do anything with any sort of experience. And so you have this world, and I think it's already happening. I think it's been happening for decades. I don't think generative AI is new. I think it's an amalgamation of a lot of practices. I think it's like a bunch of corporate, marketing schemes, right? And it's created something now that is ultimately telling people that they can become anything if they just use this product. You can become young looking if you use this skin cream. It's like, you can't. Like, you're not going to age backwards. Like, yes, it might be good for your skin and maybe there is real stuff to this. But even with my producer, Moritz, we'll watch, like, we were in Beirut, like, for a few months covering the war. And when we were together, we would watch all sorts of American television. And he would be like, why are they marketing medicine? Like, why are they, like, telling you you need this medicine? Like, wouldn't you just have a condition and then go
if you get sick, medicine? You need medicine. Yeah.
Like, why would you need to be marketed this medicine before you even know about it? And so I think that the thing that I'm really getting to is, and there's not really like anything to comment, I'm just sort of reacting to what you're saying, is just that it's creating a culture of buying and selling expertise as though expertise is something you can sell and or buy. And it's just one of those things that's like, you can't. Like, you'll never be a musician unless you really try. And unless you are just endowed with a talent that you actually develop over time. It takes that.
And I think even worse than that is, like, just to say that there's a constituency here that we've not said, but I think we need to acknowledge, is that there are people with different needs. You know, there are different sort of, you know, people sit at a variety of places on the spectrum. Some people need augmented sort of text generation to help navigate the modern life. And, like, that's not what I'm talking about here. And, you know, we and any other organization would make any sort of necessary accommodation, or anyone should. But what I think is, like, the thing that is uniquely dangerous here, like, if it was just useless bluster and if it was just like crappy content, then I could deal with that. But what we're doing is accumulating technical debt. This is the phrase for the stuff that has been produced using AI, the slop layer that we don't know how to fix. We don't know what it is because it's not been interrogated, because it's not been thought through.
From what I gather, technical debt is the future cost associated with relying on shortcuts or imperfect decisions made during software development. For instance, say you vibe code. You don't really know what you're doing. So any future issues with the code means you'd have to redo the whole thing.
That technical debt, when things start to go wrong, and they will, the people and the organizations that have outsourced most of their faculties to generative AI will be the ones who are most over leveraged. And that, like, all jokes aside and hyperbole, like, that is an extremely concerning phenomenon. And we now know that the level of technical debt it would take humans to fix stands at 61 billion workdays to fix all the stuff that is wrong with all the code and the slot player and the content and the uncanny, lossily retrieved interpretation, mood board, interpretive dance of content that we don't know how it works and we can't fix when it goes wrong.
That's mind-boggling. And another thing that I think is mind-boggling is how fragile all of this is. I think you mentioned in one of your pieces that it all comes down to, like, one company, mostly using machines made by, like, one other company. And so it's like all of this slop, all of this technical debt, all of this stuff that we've been talking about. It's actually, like, really fragile. It's not, it's like we're being sold that this is ubiquitous. This is the future. This is everything. And I do understand that there's other ways to get, I'm talking about semiconductor chips. And I do understand that there are other companies that can possibly be working in other areas, but right now that's not the case. Can you kind of explain what the fragility really looks like? Can you explain to our listeners why and how this is so fragile?
Yeah. So the answer to that is TSMC, which is the Taiwan semiconductor company. They produce 90% of the world's most advanced GPUs. So they produce nearly all of NVIDIA's. You know, they produce stuff for Amazon, for Microsoft, for et cetera, et cetera. 90% of these are made by one company in Taiwan. They are made using machines manufactured by one other company that use lenses manufactured by another company to essentially, I mean, you can watch videos of this, and I really do recommend, if our listeners want to take 10, 15 minutes after this, like, look up how semiconductors are made. It is completely insane. This is the world's most valuable industry, and 90% of the stuff it needs to work is made by one company a couple of mortar rounds distance from China. So yeah, there are structural vulnerabilities, and this would be less of a problem if the industry itself wasn't predicated on circular investment, which is a type of investment that is uniquely vulnerable to structural vulnerabilities. So any number of things could make this whole thing crash down, but a Chinese blockade of Taiwan, that's not That's not even improbable, is it, in the next 5-10 years?
No, I mean, Trump is in Beijing. He's been in Beijing this past few days. And really, Xi Jinping's main sort of communication was like, if we don't align on Taiwan, there's going to be a clash here. And they have leverage. And I just think it's interesting that all of this really hinges on geopolitics in a way, or could hinge on geopolitics in a way that isn't really fleshed out. There's this war on Iran, and there is, at this point, ships from China that are the only ships going through Hormuz right now. And all of this has made the US way more vulnerable than it was before this started, and actually has exalted Iran in a way that we didn't see coming. Especially for people who are really anti-regime, they're probably like, what the hell? You've made Iran nearly a superpower. And so you have China sort of in cahoots with Iran. Claude might have been used by the US government in some of its attacks. AI is being used in ways that we're talking about it in back-end processes for our personal day-to-day. But like where it's actually being used and being almost used in a way that is actually, and I hate to use this word, but it's effective, is that it's like potentially being used to take out military targets that are often wrong. Like in Gaza, like the AI models that were being used were like, if some guy's name, it matches some other guy's name that's in Hamas, then, or like if there's a phone number that matches a phone number and there's like one phone number, number that's off, or like, you know, let me put it this way: Muslims and Arabs, we are named after each other in droves, right?
Yeah, quite a lot of similar names, yes.
Yeah. Well, my name is Afif and Suli, and so is my grandfather's name. And you know what? Like, that's how this works. And so it's like, if AI is being used for this, I guess I'm making the point that AI is being used to advance warfare and geopolitics, but in the same breath, it's also so fragile because of geopolitics. And so I wonder if it's like, does this actually mean AI could go away? Like, could it just go away? Like, could it just be fucked over in a swoop?
And there are a lot of people who say things like AI could be good. It just depends how we use it. Well, at the moment, in the here and now, in the real hard-earned lived experience of how AI is being used, it is being used to do things like accelerate the mechanized slaughter of Iranians and Palestinians and Lebanese, to industrialize and weaponize mass surveillance, to extract even more oil and gas that is poisoning us and maxing out our carbon budget, to gain trader bros, some of the worst humans in the world, a few more commission points every time they make a deal, to juice the algorithms on social media to maximize social polemic and sow distress and division. So there may be a version of AI that isn't terrible, but it's not the version that we have. And it's not the version that's getting funded to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars every year. I think how it goes away is by the collapse of the economic system undergirding it. No one will want to hear this, but my prediction is we are heading for a second global financial crisis, maybe in the next 12 months. Banks are already dumping AI debt. It's called risk transfer in the trade, just to get the liabilities off of their books because they can see the writing on the walls. They can see that there is not an endless money well that can keep being dipped into as long as they cannot monetize their products and generate revenue for their investors. Because the money has been already spent, they're planning to spend even more. AI could well cost you your job. And I don't think, I hope it goes without saying that that's not because I think AI can do your job better than you, nor is it even cheaper than you. Now, NVIDIA says it actually takes more to tokenize the AI than to retain a human doing a similar role, but that's by the by. It's just because of what bosses think that that's what they're supposed to do because of this like completely uncritical, unthinking, overhyped train that we all unfortunately find ourselves sitting on. It's probably going to bring down some of the banks that you use to put any money that you have. It's probably going to end up leading to the death of some places where your pension may be invested. For example, it's going to cause real, genuine personal financial harm to you. Yes, you specifically, whoever is listening to this. And it is already making our daily lives hackier, crappier, less enjoyable because we have to interact with the Internet of Things, and OpenAI and NVIDIA monopolize global RAM supply chains. And so therefore we can't get upgrades when we need it. And all of our phone updates insist we do Gen AI, which max the battery and the processor power, and it means just life is just getting shitter, right? Your photos disappear from the cloud because some engineer deployed an AI agent and it went rogue, or like AWS goes down because Amazon has been outsourcing its coding to agents. Like the whole world, as we experience it, is getting shitter, like already, and it's about to get a lot worse economically and socially, and that is because of AI. That is how AI pops. That is how AI disrupts. That is how AI potentially ends the world. Not in the Asimovian, the robots have attained self-awareness type of way, but in a way that enough institutions are convinced to outsource and automate so much of our economy's load-bearing functions to agents that we have no way as a collective globalized society of maintaining or fixing supply chains when it goes wrong. And that is the logical, worst case, I'll admit, endpoint to this, in my view. And if any of your listeners have a problem with this, I will remind them that the hyperscalers exist in reality. They have names and addresses and LinkedIn profiles. They have lobbying meetings with governments. You can do things to slow them down. You can do things to stop them. You are not completely powerless against this wave, although quite often it can feel like it. And that's also what they want you to feel like it, the inevitability, the empower, the lack of power that people perceive against this wave. So yeah, that's my sort of predictions. I'm sorry they're not less gloomy.
I really appreciate you being with us today, Patrick Galey, expert on AI, expert on economics, and really breaking it down for us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Finally, Patrick, could you show us your new tattoos that you got today?
I got this morning. Yeah, I don't know if these will show up very well. How do we do this?
Oh, those are
they're little designs.
Yeah.
By a local artist, and she donates an amount to Palestinian relief each time.
Oh, amazing!
And the artist's name is Karen, and you can find her at Insatious Tattoo on Instagram, and she's a legend. So I promised I'd give her a plug.
Hell yeah!
Maybe we can put the handle in the show notes or something.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Why not? Oh, thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate it.
يابا عفيف عفيف ما عفيف يسولي على الام لو اجتمع كل الام ام 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 ما عفيف عفيف ما عفيف يسولي لو اجتمع لو ما عفيف يسولي على الام لو اجتمع ما عفيف يسولي على الام لو اجتمعت الام يابا عفيف 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 عفيف